I am Nancy Sawyer. I am a life coach. I focus on teaching midlife mastery, and I'm here today with you with Life Coach University. This is a pay it forward talk. What does that mean? It just means that it is free, and all we ask is that you pay it forward in some way throughout your day today. Buy someone a cup of coffee, or share with them some information you learned, say something nice, maybe share this link with them, or tell them about Life Coach University and everything that's available to them on this platform. It's an incredible platform, and our mission is to coach millions more. So we do that by offering these free talks on different topics, different subjects, so that you can learn and grow and hopefully lead a more fulfilling, more happy, more successful life. So thank you for joining me today. And I'm getting the message that my audio is good. That's great. I want to appreciate you for taking the time to be with me today. So as I said, I am Nancy Sawyer. I am a life coach. I focus on midlife mastery, everything that it takes to master midlife. And a very big piece of what I talk to many people about is living with intention, living intentionally, so that you are creating the life and the experience of life that you want for yourself. So many times people think that they're at the mercy of what life throws at you. And that's really, I mean, yes, of course, there's many things we can't control, but there's an awful lot that we can control. And so one of my biggest goals when I work with clients is to help them switch that narrative, that mindset in their head that says they're suffering and they're a victim to everything that life throws at you, and to help them recognize how much power they have and how much power you have to create the experience you want of life. I want to point out, before I move forward in this webinar, there is a Q&A in the bottom. You can write questions in there, type a question in there. If you have a comment, if you want to comment on something I said, or if you have a question that you want me to clarify, or if there's something going on in your own life that you'd like to toss in and like me to speak on, that's fine as well. I can definitely leave room as well in the end for Q&A, but feel free to just add a question in as I'm talking. So today, I wanted to talk about the importance of pausing. In my work, I lead workshops called Permission to Pause. And the goal of those workshops is to give the participants a space for them to step into, to step off the hamster wheel, and to step into a space where they are free to be themselves, to feel what they're feeling, to experience what they're feeling, to reflect on what's been going on for them, to reflect on the direction their life is going, and to take a minute to see if maybe they want to pivot. Maybe they need some changes. Maybe there's something that needs attention that they're not giving attention to. I fully believe that every individual would be much better off if they would learn to take intentional pauses throughout their day, throughout their week, and throughout their life. And so this is what I teach in my workshops. And this is what I'm going to give you a little glimpse into today, a little bit about what we teach in the workshop and how we can use an intentional pause. It can be a micro pause that's a split second. It can be an intentional pause to sit and journal. It can be a longer pause in our life. Maybe we take a few months off after college or after leaving a job, if we're switching careers, to kind of gather ourselves, to get ourselves grounded, to check in with ourselves. So as we talk about taking a pause, the most simple way to take a pause is to just take a breath. Taking a breath that's a second or 2 or 3 or 5 or even 10 seconds. You can take a breath in, hold it for 5 seconds, and then let it out. The beauty of doing this is that in taking that intentional breath, you are pausing the automatic responses in your brain. You're pausing the next thing that is going to happen, and you're creating space between the stimulus and your response. This is a great tool, especially if you're in a situation where you're in a conversation and maybe someone says something that hits you the wrong way. Maybe you're at work and someone comes into the room with an aggressive tone. You see, our immediate instinct generally is to respond quickly. And oftentimes when we do that, it's just coming from a fear-based response or a need-based response. And so what may happen is we let things slip out. I was watching a podcast from Gary John Bishop this morning with someone who I follow. And I so admire, a speaker and an author. And he was saying that however you act, if you respond in anger, say you yell at someone or you curse or you do something that is maybe not showing up as your best self, what he said is, the other person doesn't have to live with you after that, but you have to live with you after that. So sometimes in hindsight, we say, geez, I wish I didn't react like that, or I wish I didn't say that. When we take this intentional pause and breath, this gives us, in that second or couple seconds, an opportunity to change course, to change direction, to ask ourselves. These are some of the questions that you can ask while you are taking this pause. You can ask, how do I want to respond to this? What would the best version of me do in this situation? How do I want to show up in this situation? I use intentional pauses all day long. And I'm going to give you an example of some ways that I use them. Maybe some of these will be helpful for you or they'll resonate with you. So for example, when I know my kids are coming home from school, I know it's going to be a little chaotic. I know they're going to come, they're going to have questions, they're going to feel exhausted, they're going to dump all their stuff on the floor. I know that there's a lot of stuff that's about to happen. So I take an intentional pause about 10 minutes before I know someone's going to be home. And I sit in quiet and I do some breathing and I prepare myself so that when they burst through the door and dump all their stuff on the ground and have all their mom needs, right? All their stuff that they need from mom, I can show up as a good version of myself, as the mom that I want to be, instead of being in the middle of, because I've done this before, I used to do this for many years. I'd be in the middle of working on the computer or in the middle of doing something, and then they burst through the door and they say, Mom, Mom, and I'm like, oh, shush, I'm working on something, right? And then later on, as I reflect, I'm like, oh, I didn't show up as the mom I wanted to be in that moment. And so a lot of times I talk with my clients about reverse engineering. How can you reverse engineer that? If you want to show up as X or Y or Z for this meeting, for this interaction, for this experience, what do you need to do beforehand to prepare yourself for that? It's reverse engineering your life, right? We're creating our lives every day by the choices we make. And when we can intentionally pause and say, who do I need to be in this next experience, in this next meeting, in this next piece of my life? Who do I need to be? Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? Once we identify that, we can ask ourselves the question, what do I need in this moment so that I can show up like that. These things build upon each other. These small pauses build upon each other. We start by taking small pauses to reflect. We say, what's going well for me right now? We think about all the things that are going well. And then we think about what is not going so well for me right now? What needs attention? Once we identify those things, the next step is to pause and say, okay, maybe this isn't going so well for me right now. Maybe you're unhappy at work, or there's something going on with a coworker. Maybe it's something to do with your child. Maybe it's something to do with your relationship. This isn't sitting well with me right now. This is not going well for me. You see, in our society, especially in Western society where I live, especially in the Northeast United States, there's a lot of high achievers, a lot of very bright people, a lot of achievements, a lot of social ladders to climb. And what I often witness is people going fast, going through all the motions to get to the next promotion, to get to the next achievement, to get the next new toy, new car, or something like that. They're going through all these motions. And sometimes we move so fast that we end up in a place and we wake up and we say, how did I get here? So the way to prevent that is to slowly, intentionally go through life a little bit slower, okay? Instead of always being in the pursuit of something, I've learned to take a pause and be in the moment so we can actually feel and experience life. So these short pauses, they allow you to circle back to center. What's my center? Again, back to the society thing. A lot of times we're consumed by what we should want to do, what we should want to have, what we should act like, what we should look like. And a lot of times those things that are pushed on us don't resonate with us. They might not be something we want to be, but we follow that or pursue that because we feel that we should. And sometimes we get to those points, we achieve those things, we have the things, and yet we're unfulfilled. And that's because we're not in alignment with who we are, with what we want, with who we want to be. So taking an intentional pause each step regularly throughout your day, taking a longer pause once a week, maybe it's journaling that you're doing. What went well this week? What didn't go so well this week? Once we reflect on what we've been through, we can then identify what we want, what we learned, and what went well, and what we want to take with us into the future. So sometimes at the end, here's a great example for taking a pause. At the end of a project, if you've worked on a project with your home or at work, whatever it is, you want to take a pause after and say, what have I learned? What have I learned about myself? What have I learned about life? Have I gained a new skill here? What can I take with me? Right? We want to take a pause and reflect. We don't want to just hop from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next without reflecting. Because sometimes we're playing leapfrog and we're going. Like I said, if you're just a little bit off course, you're going to end up somewhere not where you want to be. So another way you can take a pause, like I said, is doing maybe a once a morning journaling or once a week journaling. And journaling can be a scary word. Some people just don't like journaling. Sometimes some people don't like to write. That's perfectly okay. I'm not saying you need to journal, but I would recommend taking a pause. If journaling works for you and writing down your thoughts, that's great. If you prefer to speak, I know people who actually speak into their phone. If you prefer to have a conversation with your best friend and say, this is what went well for me this week, that's fine. What works for you is what works for you. And I want you to make sure that you're honoring what you need. Maybe that pause, sometimes for me, a pause is taking a walk outside for 15, 20, 30 minutes, an hour, and reflecting on the week and asking myself questions. Again, the questions: what went well? What is good about this situation? What's the positive in this situation? So there's a whole list of questions you can ask yourself in the reflection. Sometimes I talk to people and they say, I don't remember to pause. I don't remember to do it. So if that's you, maybe something you can do is, how can you remind yourself to pause? You could put an alarm in your phone. Please, by the way, when you set an alarm in your phone, use a happy, nice tone. When people have alarms that wake them up or that tell them to do something, and it's like this crazy thing that makes you jump, it always makes me cringe because I'm like, oh, I would never want to be alerted by that. That just makes you go, oh, on high alert, right? So think of changing your alarm in your phone, by the way, to something that's gentle and kind and soothing. Something to consider. I have this bracelet. I don't know if you can read it. It says, be still. I wear this every day, and it's a reminder. So it's a physical reminder, and I see it all the time. Be still. And that just reminds me to pause for a moment, be in the moment, reflect. If you've ever read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, that is a book that is very good at helping you to understand that the only moment we have is now. And so to pause and acknowledge this moment is a wonderful thing. So as we go through life, just talking a little bit more about the pause, as we go through life, you see, we're gathering all these experiences. Our mind is a vault of information. There's so much going in there. And so by taking the pause, if you think of just like, what is it? It's one of those things with the balls and they spin all around. Is it a game? It's a game for kids. I'm getting a vision in my mind. I think it's a game for kids. Oh, I know what it is. I think it's the lottery thing where they spin all the balls around, then they spit out the balls with the winning numbers. If you envision that case with all the balls spinning around, it's kind of what our brain is like. We go through all these things all day long. We have all this input. Okay. We get up in the morning, we make our coffee, we go to work, maybe someone annoys us on the way to work. We go into work and someone says something, and then we have a success and we make a sale perhaps, or we finish the report, and then a coworker makes an offhanded comment that kind of ticks you off. And then you get home and, there's no, maybe if you're like me, maybe you haven't prepared for dinner. And so you're like, I got nothing for dinner. And then I have to run out to the store. So all this stuff is going into our head and it's all just like floating around craziness. So when we can take an intentional pause, it helps us to sift through all that. It helps us to sift through. So at the end of the evening, when I sit for 10 minutes and do some breathing, I say, okay, what went well today? In what ways did I show up as a good version of me today? What did I do that I was really happy with today? It's acknowledging the good. And then noticing what didn't go well. What would I do differently next time? How would I like to see myself show up if this happens again? Is there a different way I could have prepared for something today that would have made it gone smoother? So once we reflect, it settles all of that stuff in our heads. It settles all that input, kind of files it away, and we can intentionally dismiss what we don't need to bring till tomorrow. Dismiss those thoughts and those experiences that, they don't matter anymore. Let go of it. And hold on to the lessons we learned, the pats on the back that we give ourselves for doing great. And also intentionally think about how I want to show up for tomorrow. So we can fit pauses into our day, in a morning routine, in an evening routine, when we're in the middle of conversations. Have you ever heard of setting an intention? I often do this before I go into a meeting, go into a networking meeting, or go into an interaction. I will set the intention, which means we just take a moment before we walk in the room, before I go online to Zoom, to set the intention. How do we want this to go? What is the outcome we are seeking? Especially if you're going into a meeting with someone, whether it's in a business. Let's think about this. If you go into an interview for something, I have auditions on my mind because my daughter's a dancer and she's going to auditions coming up. So we talk about setting the intention before you go into the audition. By the way, when setting intentions, it's okay to set the intention for the outcome. I want to get a spot on the team, or I want to be successful in this negotiation. I want to get the sale. But it's also important to not be too attached to the outcome. We want to focus on who we are in the process. So instead of saying, I hope to get the job, I would say, my intention is to show up as my best self in this space. And then we kind of leave it up to the universe to see what happens, right? People who are very goal-oriented and type A sometimes have trouble with that. It's important to know where we're going, but it's also important to know that sometimes there are things outside your control, and the universe has different plans for us than what we're seeking. So my goal is always to just show up to every moment as the best version of me that I can be. And then I trust that the next thing coming into my life will come in. I'm just going to take a pause here. And it looks like there's a comment here in the Q&A. And it says, I need to practice pausing. I go from patient to frustration really fast. Yeah, that happened. I think that's quite common. And so the question is, the question I would invite you to ask yourself is, if you're getting frustrated with things, are they things that you can control or that you can change, or are they not? And so when working with clients, what I tell them is, if you're getting frustrated, so a classic frustration is talking to when you have to make a customer service call, like to the phone company, or to the cable company, or to a utility company, right? You get that automatic answer and press 1 if this, and press 2, and then speak your name, and it's so frustrating. So with something like that, when I remind myself, I get very frustrated by that, and I just continue breathing through the process and say that there's nothing else I can do. I have to go through this process to get someone on the other line to address my issue, right? So there are some things we just have to go through. And so in those situations, our goal or our intention is going to be, how can I get through this part that I don't like? What can I do for myself? What do I need in this moment to get through this? And that's if it's something that you don't have control over, but that you have to go through to get to the other side, right? Sometimes I talk to people a lot when they're going through difficult things. I say, you're in the tunnel right now. Like, you're gonna come out the other side of the tunnel, but right now you're in the tunnel. And while you're in the tunnel, you have to find the good. You have to find something good. Look for the light in the tunnel. I use that analogy a lot. So, when I'm calling the utility company and I'm in that where you have to press, and I just want to, I'm like, all right, it's just a short tunnel. I'm going to be on the other side soon, right? Now, with that frustration, if these things that are frustrating you are things that you can control, sometimes if you understand, let's say you go to a meeting every week and you're part of a club or a volunteer group, right? It's not something you have to do, but you choose to do. If you find that you're going to this thing or having a conversation with this same coworker, and it's just frustrating you because it hits you the wrong way, or they're not inspiring you, they're not motivating you, they're bringing you down, then you have a choice to say, I'm not going to put myself in this environment anymore. I'm not going to allow this around me anymore. So it's important in that pause, and that's where the pause can help you. Is this something I need to keep doing to myself? Is this something I have to go through? And if it's something I have to go through, whether it's on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, what can I give myself? How can I help myself through the process and have it be a little bit lighter? How can I make this process a little less painful? Are there things I can do? So if we're feeling patient and then we get to frustration, what's happening in between the patience and the frustration? What's happening? What's the stimulus that's coming into you that's causing the frustration? And then also we want to dig deep, and this is what we can do in these pauses. Why am I frustrated? Am I frustrated because I'm not feeling heard? Is it because I really want to do this thing and I can't because of the software? Am I frustrated because there's a skill that I don't have to complete the task I'm working on? What is causing the frustration? And how can you manage that? What can you change? Can you grow? Can you learn a new skill? Can you change the environment? All great questions. And once we pause, gather ourselves and ground ourselves, that's when we can say, okay, what do I need in this moment? What do I need in the coming moments? We can do those pauses when we're in the middle of our day. So for example, if I'm about to hop on some emails or do some bookkeeping or do something that like I consider to be tasks that I don't actually love, but that need to get done, I think about, okay, I have to get this done. I'm going to spend an hour on it, 2 hours on it, 2 hours, whatever it is. What can I do that will allow me to enjoy this time a little bit better, to make it a little bit more pleasant? And it's okay to take that 1 minute pause and say, you know what, I'm going to get myself a cup of tea. I'm going to light a candle. I'm going to put on some nice music. Whatever it is, what do you need in that moment? And then at the end of the day, that pause, what went well today? What can I change so that tomorrow might be different, right? Instead of grinding, right? We're taught to grind and hustle and keep going, just keep pushing through, pushing through, pushing through. There's a lot of pressure. Push through. I say pause. Take a pause, right? Think about it. If something isn't working, if it feels like you have to push through, maybe it's not the right direction for you. Maybe there's a different way to do it that's more pleasant for you. Is there another way to do it? You speak with my clients a lot. You're here at A, you want to get to B, okay? There is no right way to get to B. There are many different ways to get there, and your job is to figure out what way works for you. When you can work with how you're feeling, what's coming up for you, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, that's when you're going to be successful. That's when you're going to be engaged in the process. That's when you're going to feel triumph, when you have helped yourself to achieve something, but not through brute force and pressure, rather through how can I work with my gifts? How can I work with my strengths? What is the way of ease and flow? What is the path of ease and flow? Especially when things are really hard, take a pause. What is making it so hard? Is there a different way? I think a lot of a river flowing, and there's a big rock. You know, there are rocks in the middle of the river. and the water flows. And when there's an obstacle in the way, like the rock, it flows around the rock. Are you the water trying to climb over the rock? Or is there a way to flow around the rock? These obstacles that we see that cause us frustration, that make us feel like we're not succeeding. What is that big rock in your way? And how can you get around it? We don't always have to conquer that. Depending on the situation, sometimes it is a big thing we need to conquer. It may be some trauma that's unhealed. It may be limiting beliefs. It may be that you have a partner that is not supportive. It may be that you're in a job that does not fulfill you, that isn't serving your purpose. Sometimes there are big rocks and we need to figure out, this rock is a problem. Other times there are just obstacles in our way and we don't need to really pay attention to them. We can go around them. So this is what the pause does. It's time to sit and say, what is hindering me from showing up as my best self? Or what's frustrating me in this moment? What's disappointing me in this moment? What am I struggling with? What's weighing me down? And is this something that I need to address? Is this something that I can address? Or is this something that I'm making into a big deal? I have a coaching friend who had the best analogy a couple of weeks ago on a call. And she talked about in the United States, and we celebrate Halloween. And so they sell these big fabric like characters that, the lawn ornaments, and you have it's like a fan, a blower, and it grows into this big thing. And she was talking about the Frankenstein. There's like a Frankenstein monster, and it's blowing when it's Halloween and the wind is on and the thing is on. It's this big Frankenstein monster, scary thing, right? But in the morning, when they shut off the fan, it's just a piece of fabric on the ground. So she said, am I turning this thing, this piece of fabric, into the big Frankenstein monster and making what's maybe not a problem into a big problem, or into a big something that's taking up space in my brain? So I love that analogy, and I think of that a lot. And I have a tendency to overthink. So I will turn any little piece of fabric into a huge monster if I allow myself to. So sometimes it's taking that pause and saying, am I making a bigger deal of this than needs to be? Maybe this isn't actually such a problem. Maybe I can move forward despite this, despite what's in the way. These are all conversations we can have with ourselves while we're in our pause and taking time to breathe. And then we can decide if we need to pivot, if we need to go in a slightly different direction, if we need to try something new. So the pause not only allows us to redirect, it also allows our nervous system to calm down for a minute, right? It helps physically as well. There are often times when I feel overwhelmed within the day. Many times for me, I'll have my day very nicely and clearly laid out and planned out. And then one of my children will come to me and say, oh, I need to do this, or I have to have this by tomorrow. And it kind of explodes my whole day. What happens for me in those times is I feel overwhelmed. I get feeling overwhelmed. And what I have to do, what I now know, is I have to just take a pause. Instead of saying, okay, fine, let's get it done. Let's do this, and be all rushed and not present, right? I take a stop. I generally put my hand on my heart. I put my hand on my heart and one on my belly. And I just take some breaths and I say, it is okay. I am here. I am a good mom, and I am here to show up as a good mom. And I'm going to take care of this with my child right now, because that comes first before anything else. And so sometimes for me, it's a recentering. I recenter myself by taking that breath and remind myself, what are my priorities? If I don't get that email out today, that will be okay, because I'm here for my child. In the long run, what really matters? And I have another question here, so I'm just going to take a pause to read that. It says, how can I help other people to pause without telling them what to do? That is a wonderful question. Well, we all know that we can't make anyone else do anything. So what I do is, there's so much power in modeling good behavior, good self-care behavior. So modeling it and saying, hey, I'm sorry you're feeling stressed. This really helps for me to just stop and take a pause. I actually saw a thing recently. There's a parenting psychologist that I follow on Instagram. And they were talking about parents and children. So if the child is feeling stressed and overwhelmed, of the parent actually sitting down with the child and putting hands on each other's hearts together. And there was a picture, it was the most beautiful picture of the parent sitting, the mom sitting cross-legged and the child sitting cross-legged, and they each had their hands on each other's hearts. And it was talking about how you can breathe a few times and you help the other person to calm down. I think that's a beautiful thing. Now, I know in many spaces that's not going to be appropriate. But I thought what a great way to model with your children and to teach them how they can calm themselves, right? You can do it together and then they can calm themselves. For other people who are adults and who are going too fast and they want to take a pause, I don't know. I mean, in my head, I'm thinking of a little t-shirt or a little card to hand them that says, slow down, take a pause, take a breath. What do you have that you could offer them? I mean, we can't tell anyone else what to do. I have my little, I'm going to grab it right here. I have this adorable little, what's upside down? It says breathe. It's a little, and someone gave it to me. And I don't even remember who. I've had it for like 6 years. Someone gave it to me, and it has become one of my most cherished possessions. I leave it right on my nightstand, and it's always like leaning up against my lamp, usually. Although I had just grabbed it and brought it into my office because I'm looking to purchase some of these. So this actually, doing something like this, I want to purchase some and then just give them out to people. Because I think that, again, just by putting that note, that little message in their head, breathe, maybe that would help someone. Because again, I don't remember who gave this to me, but it has become so cherished. And every time I see it, I'm like, So how to help other people pause. I think the best way, and people ask me this all the time, as a coach, how do you tell other people that they need a coach or that they need help or that they need, I'm like, you can't. How do you get people to live a better lifestyle, to give themselves self-care, to start working out, to start eating better? You can't. The best thing you can do is be a model for that and live a wonderful life and share that, allow people to see that. So if someone says, I don't feel good or I'm overweight or whatever, we don't say, oh, you need to work out. But I often go into spaces and I say, geez, I went to my workout this morning. I feel so good. I'm so glad I have that. I'm so glad I make time for me, right? We want to live it to inspire others. We can't tell other people what to do, because the other thing is, and I get tripped up in this sometimes, what works for me doesn't necessarily work for someone else. So we want to be there for people and say, if you're trying to figure something out, I'm here to listen. Most times, by the way, I find that people have the answers. They know what they want. They know what they need. And a lot of people will go to a friend or their sister or their mother or whoever it is, their coworker, and they'll say, what do you think I should do? They already know what they think they should do, but they're seeking validation. They're seeking for someone else to say, oh, you should do this. This is an interesting thing I'm going to share with you. This is very personal. I had a situation with my daughter over the weekend, and she wanted to take a drive and go visit a friend who lives a couple hours away. Now she's 17 years old. She recently got her license. It wasn't like super snowing out, but there was a little slushy. The roads were less than ideal. And I kind of was like, and she said, Mom, I'm planning on going to see my friend. Is that okay? And I really wanted to say no as a mom, because I was concerned for her safety. And I have made a conscious choice to not be a helicopter parent. I think it's very important to allow kids to make their own decisions, to try things out, to make mistakes, and so that they can learn from them. And so I said to her, I said, this is interesting what's coming up for me. I have very open conversations with my daughter, by the way, and both of my children. And I said, what's coming up for me? I said, I really want to say no. But I don't want to be that person. I want you to understand the roads aren't great. You're a new driver, but I trust your driving. I know that you're careful. And I said to her, I said, what I actually want to do is call your dad, and I want him to say no, so that I'm not the person that says no to you. And she's like, wow, that's interesting. And I said, yeah, it is. I said, I really want to defer the decision because I don't want to make you unhappy. I said, and also, if I say yes, or if he says yes and something not great happens, I'm not responsible for the yes. And it was so interesting how I sat with her and I said, wow, this is so weird what's coming up for me. But this is what the pause does. Instead of just going through motions, it has us ask ourselves, what is coming up? Why am I feeling this way? And I understood that I wanted to defer the decision because I was afraid. It was fear. I did not call her dad. And I said to her, I trust you, and these are my concerns, and I trust you to make the decision that's right for you. And just so you know, she went, she had a great time. She got home safely. It all worked out fine. But it's so important to take note. Take note of how you're feeling. Speak about it, pay attention to it, understand where it's coming from, and then make pivots or decisions moving forward that are to the best of your ability, right? And when we do this, when we talk about it, when we take these intentional pauses, when I'm in a conversation and I say, you know what? I just need a minute to process what you just said. Can you just give me 30 seconds? When we do this, we are showing people that it's okay to do that. We're teaching. That's how I learned to do these things, by seeing other people do them. I'm like, oh, you can do that? Huh, that would be so helpful. So now I institute these things and now I teach others, right? But the best way is to be a model for others. So with that, I want to invite you today to be intentional, to take pauses, to maybe set an intention, breathe and set an intention before you go into a meeting, a conversation, maybe even before getting a good night's sleep. I'm going to get a good night's sleep tonight, right? So as you think about pauses, I want you to know, do not power through. Take the pause. The pause is going to be much more powerful. There's a lot of power in that pause. You're not using wasted time. Because if you respond in a way that doesn't represent you well, you got to do some cleanup afterwards, right? But if you take that mini pause so that you can respond in a way that represents you well, you don't have to do the cleanup. If you take that pause to redirect and to pivot before you go all day, month, week, year, career long towards something, pursuing something that you don't really want, or that isn't in alignment with you, right? Think about how much time, energy, money you can save by being very intentional, taking pauses, asking, is this what I want? Is this in alignment with who I want to be? Is this the direction I want to go? Why am I feeling this way? What's coming up for me? What's at the root of this feeling? When we take the time to explore this and discover this about ourselves, we can then use that to create the life that we love. To pay attention, right? To pay attention to our steps. Because you are responsible for your life, no one else is. All right, thank you for joining me today. This has been a Life Coach University Pay It Forward talk. All I ask is that you pay it forward some way today, in whatever way works for you. Go to lifecoachuniversity.com. There are so many different coaches and talks on there on many different topics, and they're all wonderful and very helpful. I also want to put a quick plug in for our 2023 Let's Coach. There are 10 incredible coaches, and every day of the year, you can get live coaching. It's a group coaching situation. You do not have to go on camera if you don't want to, but you can if you want to. And there are 10 different coaches, and we rotate, we take different days, and it only costs you, are you ready? $20 for the entire year. So even if you only make one session and ask one question, it's worth it. But you can hop on any day, ask any question, and a coach will help you process through whatever your question is. So I hope that you'll take advantage of that. You can go to lifecoachuniversity.com to check that out. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Nancy Sawyer. I'll see you next month.